let's focus on Palestine now. So Huda, yourself, you said you're Palestinian from your mother's side, you said, right?
From my father's side.
Father's side, sorry, yes. And okay, and Iraqi as well. So yeah, you hit the jackpot, right? More or less. Yeah, well,
explosive mix.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, dinners at the family table must be very political, which is great. I mean, this is the best education you can have. I mean, to be exposed to politics from a very early age. So, can you briefly tell us what happened to your Palestinian family? They have been forced out of Palestine, I'm guessing.
Yeah, they were.
Story.
So actually, so shortly after the Balfour Declaration in 2017, during the British colonization of Palestine, my great-grandfather was shot and killed by a British soldier at the time, and they left my great-grandmother a single mother, and she was actually pregnant, which is probably why I exist today. And later on, obviously, we know what happened in 1948 when the Zionist militia came and expelled over 750,000 Palestinians, destroyed over 500 towns and villages, and basically later on in 1967, during what they call the 6-Day War, when my father was under the table in his front room. And they were hiding under the table because the Israeli military came and were shooting into their home with bullets. And him and his younger brothers and sisters and his mother had to run. They had to crawl from the back of their house to try and stop being shot from the bullets, with just the clothes they had on their back, no shoes, left everything, and they had to go and stay in caves for several days without any humanitarian aid. Then later they managed to, they had to flee and they left. They went to Kuwait and then they went to Baghdad, and that's where my father, basically met my mother, came over to the UK, and that's the kind of background. So I guess on both sides of my family, I understand the brutality of imperialism, and the effects it causes. And like you said, actually, I think I was fortunate. And I remember going to school and thinking, oh, I'm so much more privileged than all of these other white English kids because they know nothing about the world, And I would go home when it was like I was in the Middle East, but then everyone else would have a completely different culture, and you start understanding things more. You understand as well, but obviously at the same time, I went out during the refugee crisis in Greece in 2015. And that's what really actually turned me into activism. And it was very hard hitting for me because I was like, you realize that I've seen my family and they're in a much worse position than me. But how much privilege you have. And you look at the refugees and you look at the people in the camps in Jordan and the people living in the streets in Iraq because of the war. You go, what is the difference between us? It's literally just our passport, which ironically they've now taken.
Yeah, I mean, it's highly symbolic, right? It's highly symbolic.
Yeah, and that's when you realize, okay, it's happening because of the actions of the Western countries and the countries where I'm living, or the UK, and we have to do something. We have to act.
I completely understand that. I'm from Algeria originally, although I live in Algeria now. But yeah, I understand colonialism very well. Although I didn't live under the colonial time, but I completely understand it very well. France behaved exactly the same way as Israel is behaving now in Palestine, or the same as the US has been in Vietnam and so many other countries that were champions, or England. Or England, of course. I don't know which one has been the most atrocious, but they have all committed all these horrors, and they have not all apologized yet. If you have seen recently in France, for example, Macron, which represents the establishment, refused to apologize for the crimes that have been committed in Algeria. So they are still in this imperialist ideology. They stick to it even today, meaning more than 60 years after the independence, which was not handed down by France to the Algerians. This is what France wants everyone to believe. The Algerians took it by force, direct action, you could say. Same thing. That I mean, this is all. It's all propaganda. The West, especially the imperialist countries, Western imperialist countries, they just. I mean, if you remove the propaganda aspect of their tools, of their machinery, it will immediately collapse. Propaganda is probably the most important thing that they have. It's, when I say propaganda, I mean lies and rewriting of history and things like that. So yeah, I absolutely understand everything that you're saying, Huda. And what about you, Richard? When did you like get shocked by what was happening, what is still happening in Palestine?
So for me, I think I might have touched on this before. I lived near an Elbit factory, and I knew zilch, nothing about Palestine. Through various circumstances, I've become involved in, always been involved in animal rights activism and environmental activism. And then I got involved with this local factory. And that's literally the first time I really considered the issue at all. And again, I suppose in terms of my learning about that, I was like, well, I had read about one of the factory shutdowns before I got involved. And it's like, why are these people going to that extreme? And then meeting people who'd been to Palestine, people describing it, falling in love with a British Palestinian eventually. And those, but I think there's something important about those personal, you don't all have to fall in love, but those personal stories are the things for me that would change my way and wanting to get involved, and hearing those things and also seeing that you can directly do something, so seeing those people you could directly do something was for me, and we're all different and we have our own experiences, and for me it has been really useful to hear people who'd been to Palestine, but it's not something I was going to ever do. I'd never left England until I was like 19. I had no money and all that sort of stuff. And it's different for people from different classes if they can travel and all those kind of things. But hearing some of those stories, and then the standard kind of like reading around it. But really crucially, I think in all of my life, it's about those connections with people and those stories that mean something, and therefore and hit me emotively. And I only need to hear one, and then I'm like, shit, this is like really bad. And then understanding it in the context of other stuff. So, talking about an Israeli apartheid state and sort of growing up and understanding what's happening in South Africa and seeing we're seeing what's happening there, and making that link for me made it really simple, because as I said, I'm not someone who's going to be able to get involved in deep intellectual debates about it. But having that simple link in, for me, those words that resonate with me were like, shit, this is actually happening still. I thought the world was all right for quite a while in my own little bubble. And it's a struggle to get by day, but I'm not going to think about anywhere else. So, yeah.
So this is the propaganda element. It builds a reality around individuals, especially in the West. I've lived in the West. I've lived in France for 10 years, so I know the West. And after 10 years, I started getting disgusted in myself. That's why I left, because when you stay too long in this, I mean, you're suddenly all the time fending off against all these ideas of that are bombarded at you by the propaganda, right? And you have really fighted actively in order not to buy it. And I was fed up after 10 years. So I know what Western propaganda is from the inside and from the outside. And the only reason that Israel, just like the Western imperialist nations before it, has been able to continue to commit its crimes for more than 70 years now, is just because of its propaganda. Next time, we will talk about the support network around Palestine Action and how you can join it.
Best moment, I think, was when I was sat on the roof, and I think I said that said that out loud as well, didn't I? That this was the best I'd ever felt because this factory was being shut down.